It used to be believed that in the 1950s, there was an article published called The Magical Number Seven Plus or Minus Two. I don't know if you've heard of that. It was
No.
by a Harvard professor named George Miller. And his hypothesis was everybody has a limited working memory, and we can hold 7 items in our working memory plus or minus two.
Phone
That might
numbers.
ring.
And where
Phone
the phone
numbers.
numbers came from. Got it.
That's why phone
Okay.
numbers are 7.
Yep.
Exactly. So now you know that's why phone numbers are 7 digits. In the early 2000s, after being able to see the brain more, another scientist found the number is actually 4 plus or minus 2. So had we known that then, we would probably have 4-digit phone numbers. However, when we're presenters or we're idea communicators, we have to remember that, first of all, our audience only has a working memory of 4 plus or minus 2.
Welcome to the Business Ownership Podcast, brought to you by Awareness Strategies, helping you navigate the waters between entrepreneurship and ownership. Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedelec, and I am super glad that you're here with us today because I am here with my most amazing guest, Andrea. Andrea, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So give everybody the highlight of who you are and what you do for business.
So I own an agency called Legacy Creative. My name is Andrea Reindl. I have done brand strategy and then into implementation for people who have big ideas, mostly authors, speakers, trainers, people with digital courses. For the last decade or so, it's been a little more than a decade that I've been doing that. And I've been behind the scenes in multiple campaigns at a time, helping them take their big ideas and make them real and communicate them and grow audiences and communities. So to answer your question, I've done a little bit of everything, my team and I, just about all of it if it comes to anything with idea publishing.
I love it. So how did you get into idea publishing? Let's call it that as a thing.
Yeah, so I started with working with authors, putting them on the New York Times bestsellers list. That's was my first. I was actually doing sales for the company that did that. That's how I started. And then I was only in a few meetings, like consulting meetings with some really big authors, when I quickly learned that they all sort of have the same collection of problems, which is that they have a big idea and they know how to make things up, but they don't really know how to make them real. And I'm a doer, that I like to get things done. And so I set out trying to solve the problems that they presented with. And that's how I ended up here.
That is awesome. So when it comes to kind of authors, particularly you said in bringing their messages, because one would think that as an author, wow, you're a prolific thinker, that you're bringing those ideas out. So why would they have any issues kind of branding and promoting themselves? They're prolific writers.
Yeah, so usually people who write books or people who have big ideas, they're subject matter experts, which means they know everything about their subject. Maybe not everything about everything, but they know a lot about their subject, which means sometimes they don't know how to segment what they should put where. So when I were
What?
actually
None of
just
us
talking about
ever
this,
done that.
imagine.
Me today,
So
this morning.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So the thing is, they know all this information and they aren't sure how to frame it for an intelligent novice to figure out. And so it's sometimes a matter of sequencing their information and not really understanding how to sequence it. So I use a brain-centric method to help sequence information so that we can get to a big idea, chunk that big idea into 2 or 3 cascading topics, and then from there be able to present your idea in a way that makes sense. So this plays out in how people construct a digital program, how they do a book outline, and ultimately into their brand message. Like, what is that big idea that they're trying to communicate? And of course, on top of all that is, who are they trying to communicate to? Like, who's the person they're helping and how do you solve that problem? So it's actually that sometimes they're overly smart about their topic, right? They're the subject matter expert that knows everything, and they're just having a hard time understanding how to sequence the delivery.
Nice. So let's talk about how you work with somebody and how you start chunking that down with them. So do they need to have homework done before they come and talk to you? Do you go, tell me a bit about yourself, and they go, blah, 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 or somewhere in between?
It's a great question. It's usually somewhere in between, but usually what happens is when I first start working with somebody, once I once they're like, hey, we're ready to work together, I actually like to go in a little bit cold. So I do a little bit of research about them, but not a ton, like just enough to have rapport. And then I walk into the first time we spend together and I do what's called a brain dump. So I just get them to start talking. And I am a naturally very, very, very curious person. So I ask a bunch of questions and I get them to brain dump everything they need, like everything they want to share with me. And then we organize it into, okay, so if you're looking at all these concepts that you want your audience to understand, what's the most important thing for them to understand? Like, what is that big idea? How do we frame that big idea? Now, in order for me to frame the big idea, I also need to know who's the target market. Who are we talking to? What do they already have for a frame of reference and knowledge? And what is it that they're most likely to resonate with on a big idea? This is incredibly true when it comes to books. I think this is partly why I like doing this. When I used to work primarily on books, which I don't work on only books anymore, but when I did, if you think about a book, the title of the book is their big idea. And you only have a split second to communicate an idea in a title of a book. So it was really important that once that book goes out, that it's as clear on the big idea and the brand as possible. Like, what's the brand you want connected with you? Because once a book goes to print, it's in print and it's everywhere. So you want to make sure you're clear on that brand up front. It's not like you and I are both digital marketing world people where you can go in and like change a headline. Well, you can't do that on a book. It's in print.
Nice. So when it comes to that, let's kind of back up the bus and talk about books for 1 second here. Is it important? Is it more important for them to think of the series if they were going to think of it that way, or is it the one kind of the head of the pin and the needle kind of thing? And I think that translates into business as well. Am I thinking about all of the things that I can do in the future, or am I thinking of the one thing that I want to use as the sign on the front of my door to invite people into my home and then eventually into my backyard and all that kind of fun stuff?
Yeah, so I'm a fan of going brand first. So really do think about that bigger picture that you're trying to communicate and where do you want something to go? What is your like 5, 10, 15 year vision? What's your again, back to the big idea thing, but like, what is your brand? So I think it's really important that you start with the view of what is your brand, who are you speaking to and how are you going to solve their problems? And then think about that brand and how you want to tie things together, primarily around the customer experience. So what is the ultimate transformation and experience you want to provide for the customer? Then after that, I think it's really important to think about each individual little piece. So great, now that we know these are the big pieces, what's the first little piece that needs to be done? And that's what goes in the book. What's the very first little smallest piece that needs to be understood for people to want to do all the rest of this work with you? And if you're thinking about doing a book, a lot of people that write books often think also in series, like, oh, well, I have book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How do you tie all those together in a way that creates familiarity with your readers so that they know what to expect from you? Because when we have an idea or something that's based on an information business and we do business with those people, we're likely to take advice from people we trust. And the more we trust them, the more likely we are to take advice from them. So you want to do as much as you can, as early as you can in the process, to build deep trust and deep authenticity and a connection with them.
Nice. So when it comes to kind of that target audience, if somebody like me says, "Hey, I work with entrepreneurs." Well, that sounds very vague. Does
Yeah.
not sound very precise. If I said I work with dentists, to me that sounds a little too precise, although it
Mhm.
may be accurate. If I have something that is, the secret sauce for dentists, well, then it totally makes sense. But in my case, I'm talking business. So you could be starting a business, you could be in the middle of a business, you could be exiting a business, and those are going to be three very different conversations in that. But I think that people kind of get messed up in that in all areas, whether it's health or relationships or whatever. It's like, oh, I could talk to them or them or them, and how do you either decide what the target is or how to go general?
Yeah, so typically the way that I approach this with clients is so you're a great example because you're right. You could help any business automate their processes, right? You could automate the customer experience plus the back end employee experience because you automate a lot of activities in a business. Um, but I agree with you, entrepreneur is too broad. It's kind of hard to target entrepreneur or people who have a business because then you could be talking to anybody in any range of business, whether it's like a solopreneur that's just getting hanging out a shingle or somebody who has 500 employees that owns a
Right.
business. It's very different. So Typically, I like to get more specific than that. And there's a couple ways that I encourage people to narrow down their target market. One is by a problem you're solving for them. So, um, I actually have a client who this is the problem she's solving is how do people move into a healthy dating relationship after being out of a marriage or like a long-term relationship? Then how do they go find their next healthy relationship? So it's reasonably easy to target the pain points in those people because they all kind of have the same pain points. Like they left a relationship, they dated for a bit, found that to be unsuccessful and unfulfilling. And so now they're looking for something real. How do they change? How do they shift their psychological relationship to the world so that they can be something, have a real relationship? So that's kind of easy to target based on their felt need and what they're looking for. The other one is to target by, like in your case, by like a general industry. So you're right. You could say you work with dentists, which might be too specific. But what you could do that's a little broader than that, but still narrow, is you work with accidental business owners. Because I see dentists as accidental business owners. Nobody goes to school to be a dentist and own a business. They go to school to work on teeth, but then in order to work on teeth, they have to own a business. Well, who else falls into that category? Chiropractors. Um, other people that accidentally have to own a business because they went to school for a craft and they only later find out that that means they own a practice in the US, like not so much here in Canada, but in the US, there's a lot of doctors that fall into that category. And so they don't learn business skills in school, they learn a craft and now they're stuck owning a business. Other people that fall into that category, plumbers, carpenters, painters, again, they know a craft. They don't necessarily want to own a business. So then you could narrow down service-based accidental business owners that are doing, say 500,000, $3 million in revenue, and you're going to clean their process up so they can scale.
Well, and what I love about accidental entrepreneurs as a thing is that it's self-identifying in a fun way as opposed to dentists, which is self-identifying in a very professional way. And the reason I think that's more important in general marketing is because it says what it is. I can
Mhm.
identify it. It's not this, when people first came up with, you have to have something more entertaining and say I'm a domestic engineer instead of saying I'm a housewife. Nobody knows what a domestic engineer is. So that didn't quite cut it for me. But the accidental entrepreneur, I go, oh, that's funny. I get it. And I
Yeah.
know a little bit of, if I were to say that, people would get a little bit of my personality from that as well as being able to say just, for dentists. It
Yeah.
says to me, it sets up the relationship in a sort of fun way. Not that everybody needs to be doing that, but so let's talk about that is when somebody's identifying their niche or their target market and what they hone in on, how important is it that they bring in their personality at that point, or is that something that they'll bring in later on into that equation?
Yeah. So I have a few opinions on this one. It's a good question. The first one is I think clear over clever wins all the time. So a lot of times we, the subject matter experts, and we, the ones who are communicating their idea, think we're going to be like kitschy or interesting or clever about how we say something. And usually all that does is create confusion for the reader, listener, viewer. So I'm a big fan of clear first. The second thing is I think you asked about like how important is it that you put your personality into your brand. I think it's highly important, especially right now. I find there's a lot of polarizing opinions, which I'm sure we don't need to talk about. And what people are doing, buyers are aligning with brands that they share values with. And part of your personality is your values, right? Like part of who you are as a brand is your values. Like, do you value inclusion? Do you value, efficiency? Do you value getting something done right or getting it done fast, which sometimes you have to choose between the two, right? Like, do you value, like, what are those things that have to be that you as an organization value? And how do you align your message so that your target market is naturally attracted to you? So I do think it's important that you put personality and values into your overall brand. However, when it comes down to it, you want to be clear what you actually do for someone. Because when we go into a buying decision, especially with a service-based business, all businesses, like when we go into a buying decision, we are looking for a result, right? Like if I'm going to invest my money in something, I want a result for that. So sorry, I snap a lot. But like when you want the result for that, then you want to like tell people, hey, this is what I can do for you. This is how I'm going to make your life easier.
Nice. So let's talk about those results because I know it's very trendy right now to say, I promise you the stars and the universe. And it's like, well, you might get your grass watered. So how does somebody kind of go from like we do something really valuable for you that you are really going to mess up if you don't do it right, but it might not happen as fast as you want, or it might not happen as easily as you want. It may have a couple of stumbling blocks in the middle of it. And I think Canadians have a more of an issue with this, particularly than Americans, in that we're all about the honesty. It's like, oh, but we weren't really honest about that. Whereas with Americans, it's like, yeah, I've totally got that result before. You may or may
Mhm.
not get it. So both are right, but um, how do you help people to kind of wrap their head around that whole concept?
Yeah, so when I work with business owners and our authors or people about like how do we frame value, basically that's what
Mhm.
you're asking. Is how do you
Yeah.
frame value and show people what you're going to do for them? I'm a fan again of giving numbers. So, if you make this investment, one conversation I frequently have with my clients is that if they invest in a brand with an offer with a funnel, they're likely to see a 3 times ROI on that in the first 12 months. Just because how many people are not buying from them because they don't have a clear offer. I see it all the time with my clients on a regular basis. Like I had a lady so it's pretty common they'll 3x their investment in 12 months. So I'll tell them that and this is how it'll work. But I'm also setting it up so that you're not going to 3x your investment 6 weeks after we start working together. When you invest in a brand, you're investing a seed and you need to let it germinate and grow and then you harvest it. So the day you plant the seed is not the day you eat the fruit. And that's the timeline we give them. So I'm a big fan of doing something like that. Now, I happen to have a client that was in a few weeks ago. It was actually a couple months ago now. So she came in for 2 days. We did all of her like conversation that I do with upfront stuff with a client. I hadn't even delivered my work to her. She walked out of my office and sold out her entire year of services, which was equal to about $350,000 in the 6 weeks following before I had even delivered our deliverables to her. Would I tell every client that's going to happen? Of course not, because it was just that magic with that thing. Do I know she for sure is going to get her investment back in 12 months? Probably. So that said, I'm also another fan of disclaimers to say, like, I'm going to do my part, you're going to do your part, but this is a two-way street. Like, if you're a service based business or if you're a business that does require that your client also contribute to the results, I like disclose that up front. And that's where values come into play because if you're a get her done type person, as I am, I'm like, I'm a get her done type person, but that means you have to do your part also. So I think people really value transparency and frankness, especially in a buying process, because there's something about just being real that resonates with people.
Right? Absolutely, it does. And I think it's difficult though for people to be able to articulate it and articulate it in a way that makes sense to the person who's then buying it.
Yeah. So what I work with, you're right, it is sometimes hard to articulate it. And sometimes the way to get past this when you're the one creating the message, if it's about your own thing, is write down 10 different ways you could say it. Right. So, like, just brainstorm like 10 different ways you would say it. How would you explain it to your grandma? And how would you explain it to a 5-year old? Or how would you explain it to, we have a running joke in my family that my mom doesn't know what I do. So I'm like, how would I explain this to my mom?
Right?
And brainstorm those because what that actually does is create cognitive flexibility. And so all of a sudden you start to be able to like expand your possibilities. And from one of those 10, you may be inspired to find a way to explain it to your ideal buyer in a way that they'll understand.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it becomes paramount, especially in professional worlds, if you want to put it that way. So somebody who's a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, they assume that, or they tend to assume that the other person knows what they're talking about and they know that what they do. And it's so easy to understand that, well, I haven't been through the 7 years of university that you went through first, let alone the last 20 years of experience that you have. So no, I don't understand where you're coming from. I
Yeah.
don't understand what I appreciate that I might need it, but I don't really understand how it all goes down, how it works.
And that's a subject matter expert block all the time. Anyone who's a subject matter expert, so you use the example of a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, even you're a subject matter expert on what you do. We have in the trenches knowledge, right? Of, well, I know if I put this headline in that place, then when that person gets to this landing page from that country, it's not going to work because my buyers don't care about that. They just want a working funnel or they just want a working email campaign or whatever, right? They don't need to know that, well, if you put this link down here, that blah, 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 blah. No, thank you. Um, so as a subject matter expert, the thing is, how how do we make our point as clearly as possible? And what's interesting is there's some brain science behind this that it used to be believed that in the 1950s, there was an article published called The Magical Number Seven Plus or Minus Two. I don't know if you've heard of that. It was
No.
by a Harvard professor named George Miller. And his hypothesis was everybody has a limited working memory, and we can hold 7 items in our working memory plus or minus two.
Phone
That might
numbers.
ring.
And where
Phone
the phone
numbers.
numbers came from. Got it.
That's why phone
Okay.
numbers are 7.
Yep.
Exactly. So now you know that's why phone numbers are 7 digits. In the early 2000s, after being able to see the brain more, another scientist found the number is actually 4 plus or minus 2. So had we known that then, we would probably have 4-digit phone numbers. However, when we're presenters or we're idea communicators, we have to remember that, first of all, our audience only has a working memory of 4 plus or minus 2, which is like a teeny little whiteboard on your forehead. I literally see like a little bitty bitty whiteboard on someone's forehead when I think about their working memory. And now you'll remember it because you'll be like, the little whiteboard's not very big, and you get to write one thing on it, what matters. Because here's the other thing. Their working memory is already full. They got to like take the dog to the groomer, take their kids to the cleaning lady's coming. I got to pay this bill. It's mom's birthday on Saturday. I got to pick up a cake. Everybody already has a full working memory plate. So our job as idea communicators is get to the point as fast as possible. You have 1 slot on the working memory, maybe 2, and make it relevant to your listener in the best and the fastest way possible.
Nice. So I can see this not only working with the branding, with the messaging, with the list goes on, with crafting a speech, with having to do an IPO, and
Yep.
and even doing like a speech to a corporation and saying, hey, this is where we're going to go in the next year. Um, can you really get all of the information that a CEO would need to be able to iterate to their entire staff what is the word called when the government comes out and they do the State of the Union? That's what it is. The State
Yep.
of the Union in the for the company. And can you do that in one thought? Like, can you bring it down to that little itty bitty board?
Itty whiteboard. So here's how you can do it. What we also know about the brain is that if you can get their attention by making it relevant to the audience, it opens up this new opportunity to put 2 or 3 nested thoughts under the big idea. But what you're doing is you're nesting those 2 or 3 relevant to the top one. So back to phone numbers. Phone numbers are done in 3 digits, 3 digits, 4 digits. Nobody remembers 10 digits. In fact, even when it's not even 10, it's 8, right? Is it 3? No, it's 10.
It's 10.
It's 10. Yeah. I was like,
So
oh,
you
it's
can't
10.
even remember the numbers when
See,
we're
I don't
talking
even
about
know how
the
many
numbers.
digits it is. I know it's 3 digits, 3 digits, 4 digits.
Right.
So they're now chunked into smaller pieces that I can remember. So if you can nest it under an umbrella, you actually have the ability to stick the rest of your information into 1, 2, possibly 3 chunks, all cascaded underneath your big idea.
Nice. I love it. I love it. I love it. So, um, I do want to know before I get into some other questions for you, but I want to know what is your favorite part of your business right now?
Oh my goodness. I love when I watch with a client, them feel understood and get it. Like where they sit, I hear very frequently from people a little ways into working with them where they say, like, I've never understood my own business like this before. And I didn't know
That's
how
awesome.
good I really am. Now they don't say it quite like that, but
But
once they understand that they can communicate their knowledge better, they see their own business through new eyes, and it gives them the capacity to help more people. Because really, most of the people, everybody I work with, they want to help other people. That's just the people I attract.
nice.
So once they can communicate it, they see how they can help more people. And I like when those popcorn, like it's like popcorn going off for them, and they're like, I get it now. Like I can say what I do.
Nice. I love that. So give us an example of a Cinderella story of one of your clients.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna use the woman that was in a few weeks ago that I was telling you about.
Yeah.
So she's an incredibly accomplished business owner, was doing well over 6 figures a year, like multiple 6 figures a year in business. She is a instructional designer inside of big pharma. So she actually creates just like she educates the sales force on different products that pharma puts out at different times. And she's just like a mad scientist who does mad research. Um, and after working together, she was able to decrease her time for proposal creation because she had basic product, like basic packages that went out to her, hey, if I do this much work, this is what's included and this is what it costs.
Yeah.
So we created a few packages for her. Then we also created a signature sales program for her that she can use with multiple different corporations and clients because it's her IP, it's her intellectual property, it's her unique process for training salespeople to create connection and more sales. And that's something that every organization that she works with needs. So instead of her recreating the wheel every time, we created a method and a system for her so that she now has her own intellectual property and concept and idea, and she can sell it inside of multiple corporations. Plus, we gave her a framework and a pricing structure to license it to
Nice.
corporations. So now she has a repeatable intellectual property that's going to continue to make her money for years to come.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So, what are some of the stumbling blocks or the problems that somebody might have and they're thinking, oh my God, Andrea, I need you in my business so badly?
So there's a couple times where I tend people tend to come to me. Number one is when they're having a hard time communicating what they're doing, and that's affecting their sales or their ability to convert clients. Or it's like they're putting out proposals, but they're not getting like you can hire, you can help a possible client. You're putting out proposals and they're not converting. So somehow you're like a gap in communication and you're frustrated. You can't figure out how to say it differently. That's kind of tends to happen at a few different times in a business, but it's an indication you need branding. And that branding looks like how do we communicate your business with words, with visuals, with mission statements and value statements and all of that. So we do a complete package for that. The other time that people come to me is when they are actually doing really well and they've got some pretty good sales and they've got some good clients and they maybe have a book published and they kind of have their ideas all out there, but it's a little scattered. And they can't exactly replicate how come they're converting people on a regular basis. It's like, well, I don't know, revenue keeps coming in, but I know I could do more. I know I could help more. I know I could, and there's like my administration is taking longer than it should. My converting of clients is feeling a little clunkier than it should. Maybe when I onboard a client, it's not the same every single time, but I can't figure out what that is. And what they really need to do is take everything that they are doing, organize it, streamline it, and communicate it better. And we do really well to help them clean that up as well.
Wonderful. And who doesn't need a little bit more of that? So, I know our listeners want more from you. How did they start their journey with you?
Yeah, so you can find us at our website at legacycreative.com. That's where they can start the journey with me. We have a newsletter there called Brandable Bites that helps people decode branding, so to speak. And then I also have a weekly YouTube show that people can watch if they want all the inside outside things. And I share a lot of how to on the YouTube show because I am a how to person. I get stuff done. And so as often as I can, I put out something on YouTube that every week I'm like, hey, here's something you can use in your business to make your business a little easier.
I love that. So, of course, we'll have all of Andrea's links in the show notes. So, go and scroll down, click on the links, open them in a new browser, of course, because we're not done yet. So, Andrea, at what point in life did you know that you were a special kind of crazy enough to think that you could become an entrepreneur?
Such a great question. So I actually ran my first business when I was 11, and and actually I'm even wearing a pair today. So I made earrings that looked like this. They're not these, but I did make them like this, and I wholesaled them to stores. I didn't know that's what it was called. I was just selling them to stores. They were marking them up times two and retailing them when I was 11. My parents
Wow.
both owned a business. I would say I knew for sure I wasn't an employee when I was 20 and I worked at Starbucks for 3 months. And I just thought, like, never will I fit into your burn and churn here. Like, I was stirring, I haven't told the story for a long time. I was stirring the cocoa powder with a knife because the spoon would get clumpy.
Yep.
So it just made more sense to stir it with a knife because knives you can't clump. And this guy came up to me and he's like, you're stirring it with a knife, not a spoon. And I was like, yeah, and it's going to be all stirred in a second here. And he gave me heck for stirring it with a knife, not a spoon. And I thought, I'm out. He's like, well, the operating procedure is stir it with a spoon. I was like, I don't belong here. So,
There are
that was,
SOPs and there are SOPs, and that's a
yeah, there
little
was like,
overboard.
or I'm pretty sure you just want cocoa. It was making like the chocolate syrup. And I was like, I thought we were just supposed to get you chocolate syrup. So who cares how I get it to you? So
Right?
that's when I learned I probably wasn't a great employee.
That's awesome. I love it. So you have been absolutely awesome. Any last words for our peeps?
Oh, you know what? I love when I know your listeners are business owners. I just think if you own a business, you have a full working memory. You have a full plate. You have a lot on your plate. The clearer you can get on your message, the more support you can get so that you have some time for self-care and some time to really give you your space for your vision to grow. Keep doing what you're doing and look after yourself. And some of that is looking after your messaging so that your business gets easier.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it immensely, and I know how valuable it is.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was really enjoyable.
Peeps, thank you for being here. Today, I'm Michelle Nedelec. Be sure to subscribe to the show, share it with your friends. We love helping entrepreneurs grow.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.